How are we doing?
Good.
You all right? Full bellies, ready to sleep? Wes, can you do me a favor? Can you drop one of these on each table?
Yep.
Well, I guess it's my turn. And I had to follow Adam's excellent presentation from last month. I wasn't there for that one, but caught it on video after it was billed. My talk was billed as part 2, and I didn't know what part 1 was. So I was excited to find out what I was speaking about after listening to Adam, who did an amazing job. And I'm going to recap a little bit of that. If we haven't met before, pastor at Gateway Church down the street here. This is my 14th year in Victoria. I am from Abbotsford, not born but raised, and spent just about 5 years in California, where our firstborn was born, and then we've had 2 more here locally. I have a boy and 2 girls, and they are amazing. And I have a sticky note that I discovered on my Bible that says, "You are the best, so sorry about the rest of you." That's from my 6-year-old. Probably the most important thing, if I wanted people to know my most important thing, so that they understood who I am, if that matters, it would be that I really, 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 really love the church. Like, really love it. Eat, sleep, and breathe it. I'm a nerd. I cannot wait for my weeks of holiday when I get to go to a different church and hear different songs and hear different speakers and meet different Christians. I got back from, we had an absolutely amazing, rare privilege to be in Dubai last week, the week before, visiting some friends, and I got to go to their church with 95 nationalities in one room.
Come on. Here we go.
And gosh, I'm going to cry right now. To get out of we live in the 11%. 11% of the churches in the West, 89% is not. We are the minority church. They are the majority church. And to catch up to where they are and to worship with them and to get a sense of where the actual church is actually going, which is not necessarily us, is mind-altering. But I love the church, and I'm also biased to love pastors. And so my aim today would be that you leave here maybe even a little bit more encouraged than when you got here. That's my goal. I hope that you go from here with your eyes clear and your head up. That's what I want. If you are a authentically Christian local church pastor, then you are rare in this part of the world, and you are absolutely necessary. We have, I don't know how many hundreds, but the last count from my limited view was 200 empty pulpits in BC. Can't find anybody. Can't beg them to do it. Can't pay them enough. So if you're working day to day in a local church context, you are my dang hero. So there you have it. I want to recap a little bit about what Adam talked about, because I thought it was so great, and apparently that's part 1. So he talked about, if you can remember from last time, how many people were there for Adam's? Yeah, I don't have PowerPoint. Adam's way cooler than me. This is old school, analog. He mentioned right off the top, our number 1 job. What was our number 1 job, according to Adam? Great Commission. All right? Preach the gospel. And he left his presentation with a question like, what is the gospel? And so that might be something I'm not going to dive into here with you, but if that's not straight, none of the rest of it will be either. We should remember that. I was so encouraged to hear his statistics on unreached people groups. We're down to 633 from, 10,000? 30 years ago or something like it's just crazy. The gospel is taking over the world. In my generation, just to encourage you, in my generation, my kids will inherit an earth where 1 in 3 people will be Christian. 1 in 3. That's how fast. The Christian church is growing at twice the global birth rate right now. Like, zoom out. You get bummed out, zoom out. Now, the stats on Canadian Christianity were fascinating. I don't think depressing in any sense of the word. I don't think that there's been a decrease in Christianity in Canada. I think there's been an increase in honesty.
Yes.
And that's fantastic for the gospel. Adam noted that there's been a steep decline in personal and corporate evangelism. But he mentioned that Baptists are growing somewhat, and that charismatic-ish churches are growing quite well. And so are churches that significantly serve their community. So I was like, home run. Adam talked about Bonhoeffer for a bit, and I wanted to repeat that. He said, the moment that the church capitulates to, and then Bonhoeffer's quote was government, but we might put anything else in there. To capitulate is to what? Is to surrender, to cease to resist. And the church is not so much against capitulation or surrender. It's that we're unbelievably, obscenely exclusive in who we capitulate to. And that is Christ. The presentation left us with the question, what is the gospel? Well, I'm going to dive in and be fast-ish. And I'm going to need your help with that. So I'm going to assume that in this room we have a high or moderately high level of biblical literacy and a high or moderately high general intelligence. Is that fair? I mean, for you it is, but your neighbor, like... So you're going to hear some references to things that are going to be perhaps conversation starters and in no way finishers. I'm going to propose an idea to you that you may, if you're Calvinist, be predestined to reject, or if you're Wesleyan or Arminian, you can choose to reject. But I hope it engenders some conversation and hopefully some encouragement when we get there. So those are our parameters for discussion. We are going to assume intelligence. And we're also going to allow a broad brush. We're going to allow some generalizations. I'm giving myself permission to generalize for the purpose of moving us forward. My preposition that came out of a conversation, well, it's come out of a lot more things than that, but in a conversation with our dear friend Tim Stewart, who has the best shirt in here today, I was proposing to him that based upon what I've been seeing a lot of in Victoria particularly, is that we are no longer living in a post-Christian culture, but a pre-Christian culture. In the post-Christian environment, the primary task of evangelism and discipleship is to unburden or extricate the gospel from the hearers' cultural expectations of Christianity, previous experience, real or imagined prior knowledge, and earned or appropriated emotional connotation. You got that? Yeah, there's no PowerPoint. Yeah, the post-Christian environment that I grew up in demands a retelling or a representation or a re-explanation, a re-defense, etc., etc. A re. That was our job. That is our task in evangelism and discipleship in a post-Christian climate. Now, you will probably, if you think back right now, you probably read a book or 5 in the 90s and early aughts that had every title was re-something. Renew, rethink, retell. Well, re implies that there's a previous thing that you're doing again in a fresh or new way, to the best of your example. For example, apologetics in the 90s and aughts and even to today, apologetics eats, sleeps, and breathes in the post-Christian environment. That is what it is for. That is its jam. People do not have challenges or questions or issues with concepts that they have never encountered before. Apologetics finds its deepest and most thoughtful work in a post-Christian environment where they have encountered it before. It is designed to answer or defend against a hearer's cultural expectations of Christianity, their previous experience, their real or imagined prior knowledge, or their earned or appropriated emotional connection. So, whether it is a retelling, a redefining, a renewing, or representing of the gospel, or an apologetic-ish approach to evangelism and discipleship, these have been the two primary equipping streams of the church in the post-Christian West for a generation. And they remain completely relevant to every post-Christian environment. Don't get me wrong, 100%. However, after more than a generation now, in certain cultural pockets, of not just the intentional demeaning of Christianity, but the intentional erasure of Christianity from the public consciousness is what we generally kind of coin secularization. But there has also been at the same time an embrace of what I would call mostly unconsciously classical paganism. And there are places and spaces in the previously Christianized West that have degraded from post-Christian to the point of being pre-Christian. You still awake? Yeah. This is just the inside of my brain and every coffee I've had with Tim. Couple notes on what I call classical paganism. People hate that word; it sounds demeaning. But what it is it's in certain pockets, like Victoria in particular, you've got secular humanism has actually died, or it's dying, right? And the rise of this is something that's very much like classical paganism, where humans, in secular humanism, humans are the agents of their own salvation. We can fix this. We can messiah ourselves through art, science, literature, talk, dialogue. But what's happened is that it's tilted so far the other way that now we view human beings, secular humanism, or people who used to be secular humanists, now view humans as morally and practically incapable of fixing it. Humans are now viewed as, by these folks in pockets like Victoria, as evil, destructive, and consumptive, rather than good or constructive or productive. At the same time, we see the rise, because we are no longer able to messiah ourselves in secular humanism, and that idea is dying. We need new gods, so we make them. We make them out of the skies or of the seas. We don't call them Poseidon. We don't call it Apollo. We call it the environment. We call it this. We call it that. We worship the land, or conversely, we become Bacchanalians, and we just dive headlong into whatever debauchery and worship that macro agency that we've lost, and paganism rises in its place. Paganism also, it's interesting, the relationship between paganism's classical embrace of suicide and what we see going on here on our island with MAID, etc., which you guys know about MAID, obviously. It's it's just 9.6, 1 in 10 total of all deaths on Vancouver Island. Like, we're an anomaly here, right? 3 times higher than the national average. Way higher than anywhere else in the world. We line up to die. So, where am I going? Defining pre-Christian and why this is actually good news for us now that you're all asleep and depressed. I'm trying to go fast. I want to give you some time to chat. So, pre-Christian. What is pre-Christian? Honey, can you pass me my coffee? Because I'm not wired enough. Thank you, darling. My wife, ladies and gentlemen, 17 years. She's amazing. I know. She's not 17. Dyck, true story. True story. When we moved down to the States to plant the work down there, my wife is so much more youthful than I am, that when we were candidating, one of the elders in the church pulled me aside, like in the hallway, quite sternly, and said, "How old is that girl?" Same age as me. He was quite upset. Okay, pre-Christian. So what's pre-Christian? So pre-Christian is my positive way to describe communities where a plurality of the population, not a majority, but a plurality of the population has no or almost no cultural expectations of Christianity, previous experience, real or imagined knowledge, and earned or appropriated emotional connotations. I want to give you a few anecdotes of what I'm talking about. Every year, Gateway consumes an obscene amount of Domino's pizza. I don't know if your ministry does as well. But on occasion, we get delivery drivers we have a regular delivery driver, and she's awesome. She's used to hauling 100 pizzas to us. But one day we got a new guy, and the new guy came in, and he's got all his pizzas, and he looks a bit lost in the parking lot. So I go out to meet him, and standing with his back to a 30-foot steel cross, he says, "What is this place? Is it a community center? Old folks' home?" And I'm looking at the sign that says church, and I'm looking at the 30-foot steel cross, and I'm looking at him and going, "Are you serious, man?" I said, "Well," and I gestured to the cross, and he looked. "So what is it?" Doesn't know what that means. We just have a giant T in the parking lot.
Yeah, come on.
Doesn't know. Impossible almost for those of you from Steinbach, Abbotsford, or Winnipeg to wrap your head around that someone cannot know what that means. We were out for dinner, me and my wife, maybe it was last summer, and the wonderful waitress is serving us at this delightful little bistro, and she's got a crucifix around her neck. So I ask her, "Oh, that's really nice. What does that mean to you?" And she, "What?" The cross on your neck. The what? The gold jewelry. I just thought it was pretty. She doesn't know what it is, and she doesn't know who's hanging on it. I thought it was pretty. Doesn't know. You can't imagine. It's hard for us to understand because we've swam in both Christendom and post-Christendom for so long. They don't know. My neighborhood, the 700 block of Cowper Street, received a grant from Blockwatch to throw a Blockwatch party this summer. And so they provided funds for a barbecue, no alcohol, don't worry, Nazarenes. And I'm there with all of my neighbors on the 700 block, and almost every single household there is middle-aged or so, and a few younger, and we began to talk. And I discovered that on my block of 700 block of Cowper Street with these 25 people, I found one person who has been inside a church building for a funeral. They've never been. They watch BritBox to figure out what ministers do, like call the vicar or whatever. They don't know what a church is. They don't know what we do inside it. They don't know what constitutes its membership. Nothing. They've never, ever actually heard the gospel in their lives, and they're 50 in Victoria. My daughter was at soccer practice last week, and one of her teammates asked her what school she went to, and she said Pacific Christian School. And the girl responded by jumping up and down and clapping, going, "Yay!" And my daughter was thrilled at that reaction. And then the girl stopped and went, "Wait, what is a Christian?" She was so excited because she's never met one and doesn't know what it is, and it was a cultural opportunity for her to meet something new.
Wow.
She's 11 in Victoria. Not too long ago, maybe a year and a half ago, a guy knocked on my door. He's a local architect, quite good at his job. And due to a circumstance that his daughter was experiencing at Oak Bay High School, he recognized that for the first time in his life as a secular humanist, very staunch atheist, that there was an evil at work in the world that was greater than the activities of individuals. And this led him on a quest to try to figure out where is the good. And so he knocked on my door because apparently somebody on an internet website said maybe we had something good to say. And he'd never heard it, he'd never read it, no one had ever explained a single thing to him. He didn't know the person of Jesus at all. And he said, "Please tell me how you guys have good. Start from the beginning." There's no surprise that Genesis begins with a declaration of good, nor the end of Revelation. I have so many of these stories, it's stupid. Personal trainer, he's in his mid-40s. He's made his millions in real estate in Toronto, moved out to Victoria. Basically doesn't have to work ever for the rest of his life. And so what he likes to do is be fit and help other people do the same thing. He's a wonderful guy. He helps people with Alzheimer's and dementia, do workouts. Wonderful dude. And somebody bumped into him at a coffee shop and talked about this place that they had just been where they sang a bunch of songs. And I don't know what the vibe is, but I sure feel better. And so he came and showed up at church on Sunday morning. He doesn't know what we're doing. He doesn't know what we're saying. He doesn't know what we're talking about. He's never encountered it in his life. And says, please tell me everything. This feels good. Mid-40s, multimillionaire, from downtown Toronto, moved to Victoria. I'm sitting on an aircraft flying home for 15 hours from Dubai. And on the flight, on the way there, me and my wife were blessed by God's grace to have no one in the seat between us. You're right? Heaven opens. Economy never felt so good. Return flight, I sit down and in walks 6'3", 300-pound Indian man, plops down next to me, and I was like, oh, okay, Lord. And he's taking up half of my seat and his, and that's fine. And I'm like, why am I here? And then the guy introduces himself very pleasantly, tells me he works for Amazon in Seattle, and he asks me, would you mind if we spoke about theology? I'm not making this up. And I said, oh, I'd love to. Why? I was raised Hindu, but nominally, and my parents weren't really into it. And I've been working in Seattle, going back and forth to Dubai for 10 years, and no one will talk about theology with me. Will you? Yeah, I'd be happy to. And he begins to tell me a story about how he's in a parkade, and I'm taking too much time, we're going to get there. He's in a parkade, and a lady backs into his car, totally her fault, and he's really mad, and she doesn't have insurance down in Seattle. And he goes home, and he's really mad, he says, and he wants justice, but then he realized the lady didn't have insurance because she doesn't have any money, and so he decided that he couldn't get from her what she owed him, so he would choose mercy. And he preached himself the gospel and didn't know it. And so I get to tell him, like the altar to the unknown gods, I know what you're talking about, do you? But he's never heard of Christianity other than as an abstract concept. And there are whole families that have walked into our church on the same quest, fleeing the values of emergent paganism, trying to tribe up in their value-driven quest to have a dang family in Victoria, and no one will help them. They're all trying to tear it apart. So they come to find their people before they ever find their belief. They don't know their head from a hole in the ground, and they're blank slates, and they say, tell me how I shall live. Now, I don't know. One of the most incredible things about getting to live in a pre-Christian culture, the glory of it, is that for the first time in any of our lives, we can read the New Testament in the context in which it was written. Yeah. For the first time. And evangelism and discipleship in a pre-Christian environment is so easy, you guys. It's so easy. It's can we talk about theology? Yay! What's a Christian? But it requires us to shift our permissions, our postures, and our presumptions. How much more time can I take? 5 minutes? 7 minutes? Sure? All right. I don't know.
10 minutes.
Permissions. I'll do less than that. Fast forward. Permissions. Shifting our permissions. Have you given yourself permission to evangelize and disciple in the way that Jesus told you to? Now, that's a loaded question, open to interpretation or statement. But think Matthew chapter 10. Let's assume you've read it. Jesus says, preach the gospel, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead. And by the way, just do that where it works. And wherever you find somebody stubborn or it's not working, shake the dust off your feet and move on. Why? Because nobody knows the gospel. So if you have to walk away from somebody, that's fine because the next person will listen. In a post-Christian culture, every person deserves 20 years of your effort to try to turn them to faith and repentance and confession. But in a pre-Christian culture, you're looking for where they're open, and you just go. Do you give yourself permission to evangelize and disciple the way that everything is done after Acts 13? What happens after Acts 13? Paul goes out. Before Acts 13, like Acts 2, you're in Jerusalem, right? And what are you doing in Jerusalem? You're in a post-Christian culture. Big honking air quotes. And what happens is you're speaking to people with previous experience of faith, prior real or imagined knowledge, emotional connotation, and you're renewing and trying to revive whatever baseline knowledge and faith is there and point it to Messiah, right? That's what Peter's doing. That's what Stephen is doing. But after Acts 13, you're walking into an environment where nobody knows what you're talking about. And so the entire methodology changes. It becomes happenstance evangelism. It becomes just by accident. Or at times the Holy Spirit prevented me. You just go like water wherever the contours of the geography of my mission are and look for the person of peace. Look for the curious. Look for the one who wants to talk. Look for the one who's never heard. But that requires a pre-Christian mindset. Something many missionaries have, but not a lot of local church pastors. Myself, at the front of the line. I was raised in the Bible buckle of BC.
Yeah.
Not to take anything away from the other provinces. But I'm walking into evangelism in discipleship in a post-Christian culture, ready to defend their experience, ready to re-explain or redefine their emotional connection or what their cultural knowledge may be real or imagined. But in a pre-Christian context, there's no baggage.
Yeah.
Unless you bring it. Seriously. If you're walking up to a pre-Christian and you're in apologetic, if you're in defense mode, you're now engaging them at a level that is not only not required, but it makes you miss what they're actually after. Can you shift your permissions? Give yourself permission. I understand that the local church ministry is a mix of Jerusalem and a mix of empire. It's a mix. But there's Epicureans and there's Stoics and there's these curious little tabula rasas out there in Victoria that may be currently largely unique even in the landscape of Canada. Can you shift your posture? Are you walking into evangelism and discipleship defensive, self-protective, embarrassed? Embarrassed, right? 20 years ago, best way to kill a party. What do you do? I'm a church pastor. Why did you invite them? No, they're cool. Now, what do? I pastor a Christian church. I always have to add that. I pastor a Christian church. And they just go, "That cool, man. What is that? What is that? Like, what even? Where do you learn that?" Nobody knows. You know, are you being positive in your posture? Are you positive like water? Do you follow the contours of the geography of your actual life, believing that you have actual life to offer people? People are thrilled to hear the gospel all over Victoria. It's hilarious how hard we think it is and how absolutely, positively easy it is if you're okay and not personally hurt that your news and your gospel doesn't get it. Wait, what? If it's not your news and it's not your gospel, really, what skin is it off your nose if 9 out of 10 say, "Bug off," and 1 says, "That sounds really interesting. Can I hear more?" Are you asking? What's your posture? Are you asking people? Or are you waiting to be asked? Oh my goodness. I was trained in Bible college and seminary and everything else that somehow, some way, you know, being missional was like, I'm just going to osmosis everybody to Jesus, man. Just be near them. No, how will they know if they have not heard? Adam's 31%, something like that. Pastors, when surveyed, thought it was inappropriate to share the gospel to maybe change someone's faith or belief. What a joke! Quit your job. How could you be so horrifyingly cruel to people? Monday night, I'm sitting in the clubhouse at the Gorge Soccer Association. And I don't want to be there. It smells like teenagers, pizza, and a bunch of adults that don't know each other or want to. It's my son's soccer party. God, why am I here? Sit down in a chair. Guy sits down next to me. In 2 minutes, he's bawling his eyes out because his 32-year-old daughter's dying of cancer. Her name's Felicia. I'm praying for her. And I ask him what he and Felicia are hanging on to right now in the face of this unbelievable and irreversible, it seems, tragedy. And he says, well, I think she'll get to see Pops, Grandpa. Okay, do you mind if, I hope it's not offensive, but can I ask you, what is your relationship with God? And does she have one? And he says, I've never had one. I don't even know where to begin. Would you mind if I told you maybe some ways that you guys can walk through this, not hoping to see Grandpa, but maybe with God? And he says, I'd like that very much. Never been to church. He's 54. Lastly, our presumptions. Do we assume that nobody wants to hear what we have to say? Or do you assume that in every room somebody here definitely does? I'm not an evangelist. I have no gift of evangelism. I have a cousin named Corky Neufeld, and that is the most Abbotsford name you will ever hear. Corky Neufeld goes into a grocery store and comes out leading a Bible study. He's insane. He's got a gift. I can't do that. But if I stop assuming nobody wants what I have to say, and somebody here definitely wants it, it changes everything. Are we so used to post-Christian environments that we're missing pre-Christian opportunities? In sum, to not only capitalize on the time and the slightly unique place in which we actually live and the time we are in, and to have some fun, for pity's sake, to have some fun to balance out all the not fun in local church ministry, could we please, and I beg you, invite you, implore you, and exhort you to adopt a little bit of what I call holy naivete. Be naive again. Somebody here wants to hear what I have to say. Pre-Christian contexts and conversations are a joy, because they carry no religious baggage. Amen. But we will not see those opportunities or make the most of them if we're still carrying around our religious baggage. So I've left you some cards with some questions for discussion, and maybe we have 5 minutes to bash that around the table. I've taken too much time already, as is my wont. So thank you very much for your attention.